press the bell icon on YouTube and don't miss another update.
Namaste and welcome to the 5 p.m. show today, this Saturday. And today I have a very interesting presentation for you, and this is part of our Christian Subversion Syndrome series. If you remember, that series that we started. Initially, in fact, we had this discussion with Esther Dhanraj, who is with me today. Welcome, Esther. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Sanjay. Thank you for having me on the show.
We had this discussion initially with Vibhuti ji, and then we had a talk from Maya Ram. And today, actually, in the series proper, this is the second episode of that series. And this focuses on the most fundamental idea of Christianity, and that is creationism. Now, let me not define it for you, because Esther is there, and I leave it to her to guide you through this presentation that she's going to make, and then we will all ask her some questions. And be ready with your questions from now on. Start subscribing straight away to the channel. And listen to the presentation very carefully and ask questions. That's it. Okay, Esther, all yours.
Namaste, viewers. I am going to be presenting creationism. And this is the most fundamental apologetic of Christianity. And this is a little intense subject. And I have put together a presentation for you, just so you'll be able to follow along as I'm throwing out jargon and, a lot of technical terminology. So I hope just stay with me, and I hope you'll understand what I'm trying to say. So before I start sharing the screen, let me just tell you that the reason I call this the most important, the fundamental Christian apologetic is because you demolish creationism and the rest of the doctrines automatically collapse. That is how important this doctrine is. So I'm saying apologetic, and I'm also saying doctrine. In this context, I'm using them alternately. I'm meaning the same word. So let me start sharing my screen. And so creationism, that's the most fundamental apologetic. And let me define creationism for you. It is defined as the taking of the Bible, particularly the early chapters of Genesis, and Genesis happens to be the very first book of the Judeo-Christian Bible, taking the early chapters as literally true and as guides to the history of the universe and to the history of life, including us humans down on this.
We can't see your PPT. Are you showing a PPT?
Yeah, I'm trying to show the PPT.
No, it's not coming across yet.
I said share the screen. So
share the screen, and then there will be some options.
Yes. So
yeah,
can you see the screen now?
It's there now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So that's creationism. Let me go over again. So that's creationism and the most fundamental apologetic. And the definition of creationism, I would like to call it as something that can be defined as a taking of the Bible, particularly the early chapters of Genesis, as literally true and as guides to the history of the universe and to the history of life, including us humans on this very earth. this is also, Genesis also happens to be the beginning history of languages, how languages came about and how races came about. So anybody who takes these verses, these chapters from the Genesis as true, literally true, that's how we define creationism, and people that subscribe to that theory are creationists. And I will come to that in a little bit. But let me say at the outset that Genesis story is the basis for salvation. There is no Genesis event, there's no disobedience of Adam and Eve. There's no disobedience, there's no original sin, which is another doctrine, very big doctrine. And no original sin, there is no need for salvation. And no need for salvation, no need for Jesus. So that is how important Genesis is. That is how important Genesis is for salvation, and salvation is important for the standing up of Christianity. So, and salvation comes into play only if the Genesis creation account is taken literally. As long as it is read literally, the need for salvation and the fulfillment of that need in Jesus makes sense. Of course, there is a problem when you read the Genesis account literally. The age of the earth is just 6,000 years or under 10,000 years. But if you take it metaphorically, then the salvation event would have been a wasted event. And if it didn't, I mean, if the creation event did not happen, then the salvation event is fabricated. The doctrine of salvation is fabricated. In either case, I would suggest the doctrine of salvation and the doctrine of creationism can be totally discarded. So you see the link between salvation and Genesis account. So the list of, I mean, Genesis also has the list of what day, what was created. So day 1, it's light. Day 2, it's the sky. Day 3, land, sea, plants, and trees were created. Then day 4, sun, moon, and stars. Then day 5, sea and sky creatures. Day 6, land animals, including humans. And then God was tired and rested on the 7th day. But interestingly, I just want to throw in this fact here. According to Christianity, the day of lazing around is holier than the productive days. But also the coinage, work is worship, also comes from the same place that Christianity comes. But that's besides the topic. So where am I? Okay, so how was creationism born? Initially, it was truly an American phenomena. It did not come out of the borders of America. So creationism was born out of the denial of the evolution of species through natural selection. So this was against Darwinism. So it was an almost exclusively American phenomena. And for a long time, it remained like that. Confrontations between creationists, that is, people who subscribe to the literal reading of the early chapters of Genesis, their confrontations with followers of Darwin's theories that took place throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, especially in the United States. And in 1925, at the so-called monkey trial, John Scopes, a teacher in Dayton, Ohio, was convicted for teaching his children, his students, the theory of evolution. You see, until 1925, there was no need for this doctrine. So as a result of several scientific discoveries and advances, especially in the field of biology, the theory of evolution gradually gained acceptance. I'm not going into the details of what happened in this the monkey trial, but just to give you a gist of where it started and how recently it started. So soon all the scientific discoveries and advances just threw the trashed the creationism as fast as it took birth. And in 1968, the United States Supreme Court declared the anti-evolutionist laws in force in several states as unconstitutional. So, I mean, you can imagine from 1925 to 1968, until United States Supreme Court intervened, there were something called anti-evolutionist laws, which means do not teach students in schools, evolution. So in 1968, the Supreme Court declares all such laws as unconstitutional. So what are the, here I have in 10 points summarized what are the fundamental beliefs of creationists. So stay here closely with me. So the first point is God created in 6 days, all of life, including Homo sapiens, and man was created in the image of God. Adam was the first created human being, and he was created from earth's dust. And God breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And the second belief is God gave Adam the primeval Garden of Eden to tend. And he commanded Adam not to eat the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and this came to be called the forbidden tree, the forbidden fruit. And what was the penalty for disobeying God? Death. God saw that, third belief is God saw that Adam needed company, so he created animals, anticipating they would be sufficient. But soon God realized that he was wrong. He found Adam was still alone. So what does he do? He puts Adam to sleep, took from him a rib, and created a new companion, Eve. Thankfully, at least this time, he foresaw that this guy, Adam, would soon need something more than just company. So he created an Eve instead of Adam Jr. And God also foresaw that soon they would both disobey him, and as a penalty for their disobedience, he would have to bring into play, guess what? Marriage and conjugation between man and woman, reproduction, and especially motherhood for the woman, and toiling for his family for the man. So you see that thinking how marriage is a sin, is a result of sin, how conjugation between man and woman is the punishment for human beings. So luckily this is not true. So but still this is what at least half of America believes. So the fourth belief is Adam and Eve were persons of innocence initially, meaning they had no knowledge of their own potential to procreate. Soon Eve yielded to the temptations of talking serpent, and Adam joins her in disobeying God. And together they eat the forbidden fruit. They both suddenly become cognizant of their bodies and their being, their very being. And they covered their nakedness from God. The fifth
Can
belief
you move your PPT? It's not moving. It's stuck on the first slide.
Yeah. It's stuck on the first slide itself. What are they following then? StreamYard. How do I do it, Sanjay ji?
You have to keep
Stop
moving
screen.
in that same. You share the screen.
Yeah, I'm moving it. I can move it on my laptop. I shared the screen, and then
you move it on your own. You share the screen, share the app,
share
you
the
move
window.
from there.
That's what it's exactly what I did. Can you see that? Can you see a different slide now?
Not yet.
Oh.
Yeah. Yes.
Do you see that?
Yes. You can see that.
Okay, I'm here. I'm on this. Yeah, I can see it. So right now I'm on the fundamental beliefs of creation. Is the 6 days of creation. God gave Adam the primeval Garden of Eden. Can you see that slide?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Next
Okay.
slide.
Can you see the fundamental beliefs of creationists? Okay.
Right.
Okay. So these are the 6 beliefs, or the 10 beliefs of creationists. Then the fifth belief is immediately, as soon as Adam and Eve covered their nakedness, God recognized from their covering that they transgressed, which means if they had not covered themselves, God probably would not have known that they transgressed or they disobeyed him and went ahead and had the forbidden fruit. So he proclaims, he comes out, he jumps out at them, and he proclaims their punishments. For the woman, he declares pain during childbirth and subordination to man. And for the man, toil and sweat for his subsistence, his and his family's. And for the serpent, because the serpent is another important guy in this whole story who tempts Eve. So for the serpent, he says, crawl on the ground and eat the dust of the ground and be crushed under the heel of man. And the sixth belief is sometime later, God saw his initial creation attempt failed miserably. So God couldn't prevent man from being what he made him to be, which is human. So man utilizes his God-gifted free will. God regretted making man and giving him free will. So God couldn't foresee that man would use it someday, but he still, so which is why he goes ahead and gives it to him. So in this course, by now they have multiplied, and God continues to regret, yet he just excuses people. But on one fine day, he finds only one family and a limited number of animals worth preserving, and he drowns the rest of them in a worldwide flood. So the seventh belief is there were other events such as the Tower of Babel, which is the basis for the languages of the world. And point number 8, the belief number 8 is all of this is recorded in the Bible. And who was the inspiration behind the Bible? God himself. So, and this creation event of God is recorded in the book of Genesis, and Genesis is a historical account. And the whole event is the basis for the need for salvation. And salvation comes how? Only through Jesus Christ. So, do you see the next slide, Sanjay ji?
Not
Sanjay
clear.
ji, do you see the next slide? Okay.
Yeah, now, yes.
Okay. So, all Christians, regardless of their denominations, are creationists. Even though they acknowledge the 10 points that I just shared, they are divided on two aspects of creationism. One is on the basis of the word day, which is yom, Y-O-M. And then the second division is on the basis of the process involved in creation. What process did God adopt to create what we see today? So anyway, divisions, excuse me, divisions are nothing new to Christianity. I would say divisions had been more fundamental than the most fundamental doctrine, but having no consensus on the very doctrine that is the mother of all Christian doctrines, that is truly frustrating for the Christians and entertaining for me, of course. So, and let's see on the basis of day, how are they divided? So Genesis uses the Hebrew word yom for days of creation. And creationists are divided on what the Bible authors meant by yom. So did they mean literal 24-hour day, or did they mean an indefinite period of time? So they are divided on this basis and they fight. And on the basis of process, there are two subdivisions, the young earth creationism and the old earth creationism. Now, young earth creationism is the literal reading of Genesis, which promotes that earth is 6,000 to 10,000 years old, and it claims that the Bible is incompatible with the idea that humans share common ancestry with other life forms on earth. And they also argue that evolution is a direct threat to Christianity. So how did it begin? It began in the 17th century with an Irish archbishop named James Ussher. He was a professor of theological controversies at Trinity College in Dublin. So he made a guess of 4004 BCE as the starting date of creation event. And he made this guess by how? adding together the genealogies mentioned in the Old Testament. Now, Old Testament has a whole lot of chapters dedicated to who begot whom. So there are so many begats, quote unquote, in the Bible. So he added up all these genealogies all the way back till Adam and Eve. And on the basis of this, he fixed 4004 BCE as the starting date of creation. And by the same calculation, he fixed 2349 BCE as the time of Noah's flood. Still, somebody else picked up this same calculation, and this guy is John Lightfoot, and he's a vice chancellor of Cambridge University, and he supplied the exact time and date to us, which is October 23rd, 9 a.m., 4004 BCE is when God started creating. Now that's the young earth creationists. And who are the old earth creationists? And how did OEC start? It originates in the liberal reading of Genesis account, incorporating the evidence of science. So the OECs, what did they do? They saw that so much of compelling evidence was coming to the forefront, and they couldn't deny it. It was so compelling that they couldn't deny it. So they had to come up with some theories, and you would be surprised how many different theories they came up with. And these guys accept some evolution. Unlike the young earth creationists, they accept the scientific evidence for the age of the earth, and they say they also go with microevolution. And they reconcile somehow the special creation of God with the old earth. The old earth in the sense science. How? By interpreting the 6 days of creation in Genesis to be of unspecified length, stretching them out to fit the results of scientific studies. And the second way how they do it is by separating those special days by indefinite gaps. I will get to that in a minute. So these guys have four different, basically four or five. I mean, intelligent design is a whole different school, but I would put it as four different categories, which is progressive creationism, gap creationism, evolutionary creationism, day-age theory, and intelligent design. So what is progressive creationism? This OEC model of the universe argues that the fundamental pattern of creation is progressive. And it's also called concordism because it seeks harmony between science and the geologic record and the biblical creation texts, which is Genesis. And it argues that God intervened. He intervened to effect the vertical growth of the species so as to obtain macroevolution over a period of approximately 600 million years. And miraculously, somehow, God created new species at key moments in the history of life. And millions of years separated the miraculous appearance of various kinds of living things. Just don't ask me how this theory goes. All you find is just pseudoscience in this. But again, we're not getting into the rebuttal at this point. So next is the evolutionary creationism. So these guys, they try to reconcile Christian creationist beliefs and scientific understanding of cosmological, geological, and biological evolution. They claim that the Hebrew God, the God of the Old Testament, and the God of the New Testament, which is Jesus, and the ghost of the Christian God, which is the Holy Spirit, who is claimed by Christians to have been present from the very beginning. So together, these three created the universe. And they created life through an ordained and sustained design reflecting evolutionary process. And this view contends that the Christian creator God established and maintains the laws of nature. And they also say that evolution is a planned and purpose-driven natural process. And in the image of God and the human sin were gradually and mysteriously, for no specified reason, they just manifested. So that is evolutionary creationism for you. Next is the gap creationism. These guys accept that the scientific evidence for the great age of the Earth, which is 4.6 billion years, and the universe, which is 13.7 billion years, is strong. And they accept that they cannot deny it. So what do? They try to reconcile with it. How? They claim that creation happened in two stages. Listen to this, with billions of years of gap between the two. The first stage happened in verse 1 of Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. That is, the first stage of creation happened then. And then in verse 2, a gap of untold length is there. There's verse. The verse goes like this: the earth was filled with void and it was formless. So they say that this expression void and formless allegedly, I mean, it corresponds to this gap. So between verse 1 and 3 is verse 2, where God is actually missing, and verse 2 is billions of years of gap. And what was God doing at this time? He was probably caught up in some domestic issues in heaven. This is when actually, if you see in the diagram below, this is when Lucifer falls into sin. God judges the earth, and between verse 1 here and verse 2 here. So this is a long gap of an indefinite, unspecified period. So this is when Lucifer falls. Now, don't ask me where is all this mentioned, because it's not mentioned in the Bible. It just has to be taken as the interpretation that has come down to us. So in verse 3, he returns from a gap of how many ever years. And for whatever reason, he decides to go on a creation spree for the next 6 literal 24-hour days. And this starts in verse 3. So he goes creating and recreating and remaking of the heavens and earths, because then the account takes you into several accounts, at least 2 accounts of creation. So what are they saying? The current living creatures come from the second phase of creation. And that creation culminates in the creation of Adam and Eve just a few thousand years ago. And how do they account for the fossil remains? They say the fossils represent creatures that populated the first stage of creation. And of course, as I said, it's not mentioned anywhere. And this view does not accept the common ancestry of all life forms. And I mean, they simply say that they were all created in their present forms. Wait until you get to the most ridiculous explanation. So that is the gap creationism, a gap between verse 1, which was the first stage of creation, and verse 3, where God returns to start his second phase of creation. And we all come under the second phase of creation. Next, we have the day-age theory. So by the time they got to this stage, by the time they had to come up, I would stress the word had, because they had to. So by the time they got to this situation, the predicament of theistic evolutionists was like this. So the so-called divine revelation, that is the Bible, indicates a universe and earth that were formed in 6 days, right? And then they have to profess a certain allegiance to this revelation. They cannot deny this. To be called Christians, they have to. But on the other hand, they cannot deny the scientific evidence of at least 6 billion years. At least they cannot deny it anymore in the face of all the scientific advancement. They did so for several centuries, but not anymore. So now how do they harmonize the biblical event with the evolutionary scenario? The harmonic model is what is the day-age theory. And actually the basis for this view is the interpretation of the Hebrew word yom. And it is used throughout the Old Testament and has a variety of meanings. At least that's what the interpreters say. And some of those meanings include undefined, indeterminate period of time, rather like the English word day, in their day and age. something like that. So the day-age theorists, whose task it was to harmonize their belief with science, took the word to mean long periods of time. So yom is taken to be indefinite period of time for this in this context. But I want you to note that this differs from the gap creationism. So gap creationism posits a long gap between verse 1, which is the first stage of creation, and verse 2. And then the 6 creation days are taken as literal 24-hour days. So then some serious young earth creationists came together and they said these day age theorists are heretics. They're blasphemers because Yom, the word, occurs some 2,282 times outside of Genesis in the entire Bible. And each time, each and every time, they argue it meant literal 24-hour day. So young earth creationists just do not agree that the earth that we are living on, the universe, it could be more than 10,000 years old. But it's very interesting how they account for everything that we see today. So then this pseudoscience called intelligent design. So the last quarter of the 20th century was marked by an appreciable resurgence of creationist ideas. So creationists tried to adapt in the light of the setbacks that they had sustained against the supporters of the theory of evolution. So the process of adaptation produced neo-creationists. And they had to adapt. What do they advocate? Intelligent design. And they adapted to such an extent that in the current statements that they put out, there are no references to God and the Bible. Those words are totally absent and no reference to even divine creation. So the theory holds that certain features of the universe and of living things are best explained by an intelligent cause, not by undirected process such as natural selection. So it also defends the hypothesis of the intervention of a so-called superior intelligence, which is why intelligent design. So this is actually interesting because they say that, look, we have dropped the words God, we did away with the Bible, and our ID theory must now be taught in schools because it's science. It's not God or it's not Bible, so it's not religion anymore. So our explanation is science. And true enough, today, many schools in the West, in the Christian West, teach in their biology class, they teach creationism instead of evolution. So we will get to that also. So they present these intelligent design theorists. They present the Darwinian theory of evolution not as a scientific theory, but as an ideology or a natural philosophy. And therefore, they say that this is unfit to be taught in schools as science. And they insist that instead their theory must be taught. So that's the neo-creationists who came up with this intelligent design in the face of the scientific advancement. Now, I want to show you some of the most ridiculous apologetic arguments of young earth creationists. I told you, right? How do they account for fossils and, how do they account for the rock strata that indicates millions or billions of years of erosion and all? So this is what they do. They actually, all this gave them a big setback. So they needed to account for all these arguments. And they say that, actually, here also there are two groups. One group is totally unbothered. It says we're not bothered by the dating methods. They're simply wrong. The other group says that the other group actually comes up with some arguments. And what do they say? When science says that different rock strata indicate millions or billions of years of deposition and erosion, they say that the geological and fossil record was created fully intact. God created the universe a few thousand years ago in such a way that the geological and fossil record was fully intact. Can you beat that? So they have tried to explain every observable phenomena in nature that scientists have discovered by saying that God created the earth a few thousand years ago, but created it in such a way that it appears to be old. This is called the appearance of age theory, and to me, this is the most ridiculous theological argument for creationism. So, moving on, when science has said that fossil zones in the layers of rock suggest millions of years of successive origination and extinction of species, they explain that God created the universe with an appearance of age in such a way that the just a minute. Okay, this is just another instance of creation being given the appearance of age. The fossil is just an appearance, creation being given the appearance of age. And then science, when science put out that light from stars take much time to reach the earth, they said that the light from distant stars already reached the earth. Remember the gap in verse 2? So this was the time when light was traveling from those distant stars to the earth. So by the time God got to the second phase of creation, the light had already reached earth. And then the most compelling argument of science is the radiometric dating. Now, according to the YEC's explanation, they say that God could have created radioactive elements and their concerned related daughter products in ratios such that they gave the appearance that they had been decaying for an extremely long periods of time. So for everything, no matter what science puts forward, the YECs rebut it just with one line. They say appearance of age. God created every single thing with the appearance of age for no apparent reason. Why did God have to deceive? I mean, that's another theological problem. Another question it raises. It says, why did God have to deceive? But again, that's we are not rebutting here, so we will not touch upon those questions now. So what are the dangers of creationism? Why is creationism not acceptable in this world? We have two prominent countries. I mean, I have at least put together here two prominent countries that have stood up against creationism. Although they are the very people that began all these, they put out all these theories. But fortunately, there are some sections of these countries that strongly oppose these theories. So the most advanced country, at least that's what it portrays itself to be. So United States lags behind the rest of the world in scientific understanding of genetics and evolution. And I think about 5 years, the census in the survey taken about almost 5 years ago, it ranks 32nd in a survey of 34. Narrowly beating Turkey. So in their understanding of genetics and evolution. And to this day, you can actually find people fighting about whether abortion is legal or illegal, constitutional or unconstitutional. So pro-lifers and pro-abortionists they have. So, and it's also the one of the largest and most developed countries, and I'm sure this fact that it lags behind the rest of the world in scientific understanding is embarrassing for a lot of Americans. But this pseudoscience, the intelligent design or the rest of the creationist theories, it's not something to be laughed at and ignored, because this is not an outdated scientific fallacy. It's very much, we know it is pseudoscience, but it is promoted as science. So it continues to invade policies and schools in the United States to this day. And even top political candidates who have a background in sciences continuously promote creationism as a scientific fact. For example, Ben Carson, he was the presidential candidate in 2016, and he holds a creationist perspective. A pediatrician, he's a very, very reputed pediatrician, and he holds the creationist perspective. And in fact, he stated it in multiple events, public events. And he's not alone. There's Ted Cruz, there's Rand Paul, Bobby Jindal. So all these people, they subscribe to the creationist views. And considering that these people are, at least Ben Carson has a science degree, I mean, it's really sad, disappointing. And creationism is taught, I think as of 2019, creationism is taught in schools in 14 different states nationwide. So why is this so important, and why is this impactful? Why should we be bothered if they are teaching creationism in the United States schools? The first thing is, this is a day and age where we are connected. All nations are connected. So if children cannot be taught accurately the principles of science, a generation of scientifically illiterate adults will be raised. And this will impact the rest of the world because it is impacting their policy, because even policymakers are creationists there. So it impacts the policies of those countries, which in turn impacts the international relations. And there's an interesting quote that I picked up from this journal article that was published by Oxford Press. And the article is called Danger of Creationism. This is by Paul F. Lurkin, who is, I think, professor of genetics at Washington State University. So he says, creationism threatens science education in the United States. The threat comes from religious ideologies such as intelligent design that have never provided a shred of experimental evidence to buttress their claims. And then we have another whole continent which talks about the dangers of creationism, and this is from Europe. So I have to say, despite the fact that creationism has risen in Europe since 1970s, it has received nowhere near the support as it has in the United States, probably because of the strict measures by the states, like the one undertaken by the Committee on Culture, Science and Education of the European Council. So this Parliament Assembly was so worried about the possible ill effects of the spread of creationist ideas. Let me pause here and ask Sanjay ji, are you able to see the right slide? Committee of Culture, Science and Education.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm watching that.
So I'm hoping the viewers are with me. I know I'm going pretty fast because of the time constraints. So the Parliament Assembly was so worried about the possible ill effects of the spread of creationist ideas within their education systems, and also about the consequences, the results for their democracies, the impact it would have on their democracies. And so they agreed that if they were not careful, and creationism could become a threat to human rights. Creationism a threat to human rights. That's what they all agreed. And this became the key concern for the Council of Europe. So what did they do? Back in 2007, yes, this is a little old report, but there's a lot to take away from this. Their whole understanding of what creationism can do to societies is very interesting to note in this report. So back in 2007, the committee called on education authorities in member states to promote scientific knowledge and to oppose firmly any attempts at teaching creationism as a scientific discipline. And to that effect, the committee presented a report titled The Danger of Creationism in Education. So the aim of this report was to warn against certain tendencies. It was not to hurt anybody's religious sentiments, but they mentioned it at the outset that to warn against certain tendencies to pass off as a belief as a science was their main aim. And they were doing all this only because they were concerned that the effects of creationism would impact their democracies. So some of the key points of this report are: they agreed that the prime target of creationists is education, because we know that it happens both in Christian education and Muslim education, that catch them young is their agenda, is their catchword. So the committee realized and agreed on the fact that the prime targets of creationists is prime target is education, and creationism in any of its forms is not based on facts. Therefore, its contents are inappropriate for science classes. And they also agreed that it introduces a serious confusion into their children's minds. And what is the confusion? It's between what has to do with convictions, beliefs, and ideals, and what has to do with science. So separating those two things was impossible for the children who were fed on these theories. So the committee also agreed that the intelligent design, which is the latest and more refined version of creationism, though it doesn't use the words God, Bible, and divine revelation, even if it is very subtle in its presentation, is no less dangerous. And though they claim, that is, the creationists claim to base their arguments on scientific rigor, their methods are of three types: purely dogmatic assertions, distorted use of scientific quotations, and the third is they get the backing from more or less well-known scientists, and most of whom are not even specialists in these matters. Especially if you ever visit a website called Biblical Archaeology, you would find that none of those people are, they're biblical archaeologists. Now, the moment they say this is biblical archaeology as opposed to archaeology, just the archaeology, it should raise some red flags. So that's what the European Council thinks here. It says that the creationists got backing from more or less, lesser well-known scientists, and most of these so-called scientists are not even specialists in these matters. So by these means, what are the creationists trying to seek? What is their goal of even at least the ID theorists or the other creationists? Their goal is to appeal to non-specialists, that is lay people that do not specialize in any of these scientific fields, and sow doubt and confusion in their minds. What do they achieve by that? Conversion. Then they incline towards creationism. Then they incline towards, oh, God created this world in just 6 days. So that is their goal. Then the committee also found that the war on the theory of evolution originates in forms of religious extremism, which are closely allied to extreme right-wing political movements. Well, I know the right and left dichotomies do not work here, but at least this is what the council came up with. So the creationist movements possess real political power, which is true. We've seen politicians like Ben Carson and Ted Cruz subscribing to these theories. Then the council also said in the report that some advocates of strict creationism are out to replace democracy by theocracy. And then they went on to say that creationism develops modes of thoughts that are attacking the very core of the knowledge that we have built up little by little concerning nature, evolution, our origins, and our place in the universe. So, and then they also said that just beware, if we are not careful, the way creationists are growing their tentacles, it shows that the values that are the very essence of the Council of Europe will be under direct threat from creationist fundamentalists. And they, as I also already mentioned, they also think it is a serious attack on human rights. So this is a complete, interesting report. So here is the link to that report. I mean, there are several more points that they covered, but I just touched upon the very important points that somehow relate to our nation, our country. So those of you that are interested, I would just encourage you to go ahead and go read these the other points here. So some concluding thoughts. I actually wanted to do this whole presentation by starting with what apologetics is and how it originated and how it actually ties with what is happening in our country today. Not just today, throughout our history, the distortion of our history or the fake narratives that they peddle. So all these ties back to the definition and the purpose of apologetics. So that's where I wanted to start this presentation. But again, we do not have that much time, so I didn't go into that detail. Probably I'll present it one of these days, what apologetics is actually. But apologetics works only one way. For the fundamentalist, reason is a tool that only they must use. And use it for what? Just to defend their pseudoscience. And when a non-Christian begins applying it, or even for that matter, a Christian like me, a former Christian like me, applies it for questioning their beliefs or for quitting Christianity, they will be told that scripture must be understood by spiritual wisdom and not by reason. So the question is, why even apply it to defend reason? Just simply say that you should take the counsel of the Holy Spirit to understand the Bible. But no, they'll use it to come up with their pseudoscience. But when we do it, they show us the scripture. So the doctrines, actually, creationism is just the tip of the iceberg. It may be the most fundamental thing, but as you go along, the other doctrines are so ridiculous. So their doctrines first lock humans in the dungeon of ignorance and dogmatic fundamentalism. And then they throw away the keys. You might also hear them say this. I've heard it so many times on the comments on my videos. They say, if our doctrines are so damaging, then why do you even bother? They will only damage those who choose to believe it. Well, here is the catch. No fundamentalist is content with his or her own beliefs. Content, I mean. A fundamentalist will make sure that he imposes his own beliefs on others. They're not merely proselytizing here. They brainwash. So they're not just saying that, oh, you know, if you follow this, it's going to do you good. No, they're going to be persistent about it. They're going to brainwash. And not just outsiders, the real threat is to their own children. So they push their creed not just to the outsiders, not just to their children. They try to do this in public schools, especially in the Christian West. And this is so related. The next point that I'm going to make is so related to us. So fundamentalists teach their children not only that Hinduism is evil, but also that entering their places of worship or even allowing their places of worship to coexist is a sin that leads the soul to eternal damnation. That's their apologetic. And fundamentalists also spend countless hours telling their children that Hindus are the children of the devil and their practices are demonic. I mean, we see that happening every day on social media in our entertainment. And also, they view the difference between Hinduism and Christianity as an all-out war between God's word and human sins. And they think that it is the calling of a divine calling of every Christian parent to prepare their child for this battle. We know that they fail to fathom and celebrate the complexity and variety of Sanatana philosophy, and instead they disparage the liberation as that the philosophy allows as immoral, unethical, dangerous, sinful, demonic, and they only pick up on our metaphors, on our metaphorical part of our wisdom, of our knowledge systems, and attack it. And finally, our greatest ability to reason is turned into our greatest enemy. And they say that using our brains according to creationism will lead us to sin, because it's when Adam and Eve used their minds to do what they wanted, that is when they became sinful. And that is what invited the wrath of God. So stop using your brains, creationism says, otherwise it will lead you to sin. Just rely on the Holy Spirit always and wait for him to tell you what to do. And they, of course, insist that, evolution has robbed us of our humanity. But if you actually look at it, it's their twisted gospel that strips us of the very thing that makes us human, which is reason. So I would say that Christianity is a mental prison with no hope of release. And the only escape hatch has been sealed off by years of suppression. And Christianity is fundamentally unintelligent, commanding the believer to snub her own logic and cognition in favor of what? A 3,000-year-old absurd text of the Bible. So that brings us to the end.
Thank you, Esther. That captured a very vast canvas in just 45, 50 minutes. That was quite wonderful.
I went pretty fast. I hope I made sense.
Yes, I think this is something that needs to be gone over again and again. I think even the viewers who've been watching would definitely like to go over this again and again. So I don't see many questions coming from the viewers.
The point that I'm trying to make is, with all those different theories, I mean, just from the reading of 31 verses, the book of Genesis has just 31 verses. And out of 31 verses or 31 statements, so to say, there are so many theories over the last 2,000 years. They do not have consensus on even the most important doctrine, and that is really, really shocking. So, and they are set out to challenge us, attack us.
Yes, you're right. So, of course, today we are not going into the rebuttal, but at least you can tell us a few, what is called the trump cards that we can use, especially someone who's confronted with a proselytizer. So, what are the 2 or 3 catchwords that he can counter them with? Then I think now we've got some questions. After that, I'll take those questions.
Yeah, 6,000. First, make up your mind. What is it? Is it 6,000 years old, or is it 4 billion years old? So make up your mind before you even come out to talk to me about salvation. And break up. When you say Adam and Eve sinned, explain to me who Adam and Eve were. Explain to me the word sin. So break it down for me. So it's actually time to stop getting defensive and just put the right questions to them. And the first question would be, okay, your creationism, this is what your creationism is. Let's take the 2 broad classifications. One, the old earth, one is the young earth. So tell me first, is it the young earth or is it the old earth? And then we will start our conversation.
Okay. So that would be the fundamental thing, and of course, then we can.
Yeah, because if the creation event did not happen, there's no need for salvation. So what am I getting saved from? if it's just a metaphor?
So if it is the old earth, then there's no need for salvation.
Either way, there's no, I mean, if it is old earth, so what was God doing in that gap of so many billions of years? What was he doing? And why did he have to suddenly appear in verse 3 and decide to start doing the creation again? Old earth or
Of course.
new earth, salvation
And
doesn't make sense.
new earth is nonsense from the beginning, because
Young
6,000
earth,
years is
yes.
so easily demolished.
Young earth, yes.
So that
But you would be
creationism did not
surprised,
happen.
Sanjay ji, there are still big, huge organizations subscribing to it. There are museums set up in the US talking about young earth.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
Maybe we should present that museum sometime on your show.
Okay. As we grow into this series, the episode 2. In the first episode, we had discussed the various cults, and that was also quite interesting. It came from Mayaji. Now we have some questions from the audience, and we'll take these questions, and I'll also remind the audience that we will also come up with detailed rebuttals of this in this very series sometime. So let's have the questions. Puneet Bhargav, namaste. Dhanraj and Sanjay sir. To Dhanraj, please tell some blatant lies of Christianity to counter Christians.
Jesus came to save you. So both Jesus and saving is a lie in that sentence, are both lies in that sentence.
Quite right. Because the Judeans did not have a Jesus, and they have same creationism.
No need for salvation also. They didn't have need for salvation.
I think that comparison is also important. How is it that their creationism does not need a Jesus and salvation, but this creationism needs? That's interesting.
Right.
Next. Mithul Panchal, Christianity can't even stand without Old Testament, which is not Christian at all. It was later incorporated into the Christianity.
Yeah, even though they do not, they cannot stand without the Old Testament, they still discard it. If you actually see a lot of sermons these days, they do not want to have anything to do with the Old Testament, because the Old Testament has so much of violence and incest, and they do not have answers to these all these things. So for them, the Old Testament is only for the so-called prophecies for a Messiah. So they pick and choose from the Old Testament, but otherwise, if they could, they would discard the Old Testament, actually speaking.
But theologically, they cannot.
They cannot. They're tied in with it.
Okay. Anshul Sharma, got late in watching the show. I'll watch the episode again. Please call Esther ji more and more, as I feel that Christianity is more dangerous than Islam.
Yeah, it's like, if I can use bad words on your show, it's like soft porn. Yeah.
Okay. Ajayendra Chaurasya, son of Adam and Eve were Cain and Habil and Seth. Then where the wife of Cain came from? If Yahweh knew that human can be like him, then why he grew the trees of knowledge and life on earth?
Ajendra ji, you don't want to ask questions of Christians that they don't have answers to. That's not even fair. That's not fair. So they've been they've been struggling to find answer to this question for the past 2,000 years.
Next. Whole PPT is same like Quran, fairy tales. Both are same. Don't use mind. Otherwise, you will be punished.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Next. core concept of original sin
Sin is fake.
fake. Still, how many people follow them?
Brainwash. That's where the brainwash, like I said, they don't just proselytize, they brainwash. So they are not just handing out a handbill, or they're not handing out a Bible and going away. No, they're coming back again and again and to brainwash you. So if you tell a lie enough times, it seems like the truth. So that's what is happening here. And also the fear tactic that the church is used to playing for so long.
Next. Mitul Panchal. Creationism is coming from the Old Testament only. Yes.
Well, yeah, the event is there in the Old Testament, but creationism as a theory is recent. It was not there until the 1900s. Like I said, in the 1925, people woke up to whole, oh, we should counter Darwinism, otherwise we cannot survive. So creation event is there in the Old Testament, but not creationism. So the moment you add a ISM to it, it becomes a theory, a man-made theory.
Actually, church is very smart, not just harbors, but it also hires scientists. You look at that God moment that Stephen Hawking hawked. That God moment that was propagated by Stephen Hawking, that was nothing but subtle creationism.
The God theory. Yeah.
Yeah.
So creationism doesn't come from Old Testament. Only the Christians made use of an event that is described in the Old Testament.
Next question. Rakesh Ori. Esther ji, if in place of taking Genesis account as literal and historic, they take it as symbolic, would it not solve the problem?
That's what I said. If you take it as a metaphor, then there's no need for salvation. There's no need for Jesus. And that's why I said you demolish creationism and the rest of the doctrines like the original sin or the doctrine of salvation, the doctrine of redemption, everything collapses automatically. So only if you take the Genesis account as literal and historic, only then there will be original sin for which salvation has to be done. That is when the need for Jesus arises. It's all about how they interpret it. It would definitely, solve the problem.
Rakesh Ori again. Sanjay ji, our narrative of creation has Narayan, then Brahma, from whom came the rest. This, though not scientific, does not threaten Sanatan tradition. Will appreciate your comments. No, this is completely different, no? Because it relates to the different theories in Sanatan Dharma relate to your state of your level of what is called level of your intellectual prowess. So you can view it in different manner. So they recognize that mankind is different, people are different, they come with different abilities, and so that's how it is. You can be saguna, you can be nirguna, you can be formless, you can be with form. Take your pick. It's a library. Yes, Esther, you're saying something?
Yeah, I was saying also I think Rajeevji pointed out in his books, that's the difference between history-centric religions and non-history-centric religions. Christianity is a history-centric religion. Demolishes its history. I mean, prove that none of those things are historical, and Christianity falls automatically. Right. But Sanatan tradition is not history-centric, which is why whether Ganesha exists or not as a historical person, Hinduism will still stand. I mean, Sanatan philosophy will still stand. That's the difference.
Next. Sharat Kumar, why was December 25th chosen as the birthday of Jesus? Is Christmas really Jesus' birthday?
Who is Jesus, by the way? Which Jesus are you talking about?
That's the more fundamental question.
Yeah,
Okay.
we have to
Nitin
first
Panjan.
argue that.
Hemant Mehta friendly atheist YouTube channel has a series of everything wrong in the Bible. Gives good insight of Christian theology.
Yeah.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of the questions. Thank you very much, Esther. You had a very enlightening session, and we hope to continue on this path. We've got two more apologetic coming up, and that is the original sin and salvation. Is it?
Yes. Original sin. Yes. Original sin and substitution, I would say. Substitution is somebody else dying for one's mistake. One does the sin and the other dies for it. The ridiculous substitution doctrine.
Okay.
Does it
So,
even make sense?
Quite right. So thank you very much, and thank you all viewers. Jai Hind,
I would like to
Vande.
say something, Sanjayji, before we close. So
Yeah,
I,
please.
I would like the viewers to give feedback to this. I mean, I know this is highly technical, something that a seminary student would take about 2 or 3 semesters to read. I tried to sum it up all in just 50 minutes. So I would like some feedback on the kind of presentation, if anybody understood anything at all. So I would like that kind of feedback, Sanjayji. That's what I want.
Sure. So we'll put
I mean,
it
I
to
would
review.
change my method of presentation if this is not working.
That will all have comments coming down, so we will get the feedback. So thank you, Esther, once again, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you for
the
having
viewers. Jai Hind, Vande Mataram.